"Oh, good. You're here," Sharon said with that fake smile, gesturing at the concrete slab where my grandfather's workshop once stood. "We've removed that eyesore while your grandfather was in surgery." She had no idea she'd just walked into my legal trap. For months I'd been documenting everything, installing hidden cameras and working with an attorney because I knew our power-hungry HOA president would strike when we were vulnerable. Now I was about to make her pay for every splinter she destroyed. Grandfather wasn't just any woodworker. He was William Thomas, master craftsman whose pieces graced museums and the governor's mansion. His workshop was a place where magic happened, weathered hands transforming raw wood into breathtaking masterpieces that people crossed states to commission. The cedar siding had aged to a rich silver gray. Large windows let in perfect natural light. Inside, custom workbenches housed hand tools inherited across generations, chisels with handles polished smooth from decades of use, planes that could shave wood thin enough to read through, and the lathe where he created intricate bowls that galleries competed to display. But to Sharon Matthews, our power-hungry HOA president, it was just an eyesore that didn't fit her vision of aesthetic cohesion. The bright orange violation notice she'd slapped on his door 3 months ago was just the beginning. Welcome to my story of how meticulous preparation delivered the most satisfying revenge. The conflict with Sharon had been brewing for months. Unauthorized industrial activity in a residential zone, her first complaint declared. Her perfectly manicured nails tapped impatiently as she explained that neighbors had complained about the unsightly structure and excessive noise. Never mind that the workshop predated the HOA by 20 years. Never mind that grandfather rarely used power tools, preferring the quiet precision of hand tools. Never mind that his unsightly structure was regularly photographed for architecture and craftsman magazines. Those details didn't matter to Sharon. Grandfather handled it with grace, showing her his original building permits, explaining the historical significance of his work, even inviting her to see the commission he was completing for the State History Museum. But I saw the worry in his eyes. "They've been trying to get rid of us old-timers for years," he told me one evening as we sat on his porch. "They want to tear down everything with character and replace it with their beige boxes." He wasn't wrong. Our once diverse neighborhood had transformed house by house. Character homes replaced with cookie-cutter McMansions in 50 shades of beige. Mature trees removed for appropriate landscaping. Longtime residents pushed out by rising HOA fees and nitpicky violations. When the second violation notice appeared, I started paying closer attention at HOA meetings. Sitting quietly in the back row during the quarterly meeting, I heard Sharon mention my grandfather's address. "The Thomas property continues to be problematic," she said, her voice carrying across the room. "That workshop violates at least 7 of our bylaws, and frankly, it's an eyesore that's affecting property values." Robert Jenkins, the architectural committee chair, nodded enthusiastically. "We've issued 3 violations already with no compliance. Perhaps it's time we considered more direct measures." Sharon's eyes lit up. "The bylaws do allow for removal of non-compliant structures after multiple violations, and with Mr. Thomas being elderly, it might be easier to address while he's indisposed." The casual cruelty of their planning sent me straight to Frank Morrison, grandfather's attorney, the following day. I played him the audio recording I'd secretly made. "They can't really do that, can they?" I asked. "Technically, no," Frank explained. "But HOAs often bank on homeowners not knowing their rights or having the resources to fight back. That's when we developed our plan, a comprehensive legal defense that would protect my grandfather's workshop and put Sharon's power-hungry board in their place. Step by step, we gathered documentation. First, the original building permits from 1975, showing the workshop was legally constructed long before the HOA existed. Then my grandfather's business license, renewed every year since 1978, proving his status as a legitimate business. Frank helped us file for a home business exemption with the county, which was automatically approved given my grandfather's decades-long operating history. We documented every aspect of the workshop, from the historical significance of his craftsmanship to the custom features that made the space irreplaceable. We took detailed photographs and videos, cataloging every tool with approximate values and provenance information. Most importantly, Frank sent a certified letter to the HOA board, formally notifying them of the workshop's protected status under County Ordinance 15.7, which specifically exempted established home businesses from retroactive HOA restrictions. The letter explicitly warned that any action against the protected structure would constitute willful property damage. I installed security cameras covering every angle of the workshop, with footage backed up to cloud storage. When grandfather told me he needed heart surgery, my concerns doubled. "It's a simple procedure," he assured me with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "I'll be back annoying Sharon with my sawdust in no time." The night before his surgery, I stayed late helping him organize current projects, wrapping half-finished pieces and making notes about customer preferences. He showed me his most valuable tools, carefully rolling up leather cases and explaining the history of each one. "This chisel set came from Japan in 1982, he said, his weathered hands gently opening the silk-lined case, revealing gleaming tools inside. "They don't make them like this anymore." As he walked me through each drawer and cabinet, I realized he was doing more than giving instructions. He was sharing his legacy, making sure I understood the value of what he'd created. The hospital called at 5:30 a.m. The surgery had been moved up. Grandfather was being prepped right now. I grabbed my pre-packed bag and rushed to the hospital, promising to check on the workshop later that day. If I'd known what was happening across town, I would have never left. The surgery was complicated but successful. The doctors were cautiously optimistic about his recovery. He'd need to stay in the hospital for at least a week, followed by several weeks of recovery at home. I called my boss, arranged for emergency, family leave, and settled in for the long haul. It wasn't until the following morning that I finally made it back to check on the workshop. Driving down our street, something felt wrong immediately. The towering oak that had shaded the workshop for decades was gone, chunks of fresh sawdust still scattered across the lawn. But that wasn't what made my heart stop. Where the workshop had stood for over 40 years was nothing but a concrete slab surrounded by construction debris. My grandfather's beloved sanctuary had been completely demolished. I stumbled out of my car, unable to process what I was seeing. Piles of splintered cedar siding, broken window glass, the custom workbenches reduced to jagged pieces. Someone had stuffed my grandfather's tools, projects, and supplies into industrial garbage bags that lined the driveway. A bright green notice was taped to our front door. "Violation resolution completed," it declared in bold letters. "Unauthorized structure removed per HOA bylaw section 7.3.2. The bottom listed an invoice for $4,200 for demolition services that would be added to our HOA account. I whirled around at the sound of heels clicking on the sidewalk behind me. Sharon Matthews stood there, clipboard in hand, her blonde hair perfectly styled despite the early hour. "Oh, good, you're here," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "We've prepared several approved shed designs that would be more appropriate for the neighborhood." She held out a glossy brochure showing 3 identical beige garden sheds. "The demolition crew saved what they could," she continued, gesturing to the garbage bags, "but most of it wasn't salvageable, unfortunately." That's when I noticed what she was really saying. They had destroyed everything. My grandfather's irreplaceable antique tools, his half-finished commission pieces, decades of specialized jigs and templates, all gone. I finally found my voice. "You had no right," I whispered. Then louder, "You had no right." Sharon took a step back, her fake smile faltering. "Now there's no need to get emotional. Your grandfather was warned repeatedly about his violations. This is simply the consequence of ignoring HOA regulations." As Sharon turned to leave, she added, "And do remember that screaming at board members is a violation of the Community Conduct Code, Section 4.1. I wanted to scream, to cry, to chase after her and demand justice. But instead, I took a deep breath and pulled out my phone. Grandpa's attorney answered on the first ring. "They did it, Frank," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "They demolished the workshop while he was in surgery." There was a long pause, then Frank's calm voice replied, "Send me photos of everything. Don't let them remove anything else. I'm on my way." I hung up and started documenting everything, taking detailed pictures of the destroyed workshop, the garbage bags, the notice, while fighting back tears. But as the initial shock began to fade, something else took its place. A cold, calm certainty. This wasn't just an HOA overreach. This was the moment I'd been preparing for ever since I overheard Sharon's plans. I pulled out my phone again, this time to call the police. "I need to report destruction of property and theft," I explained to the dispatcher. "And I have video evidence of who did it." While waiting for the officers to arrive, I carefully opened some of the garbage bags. I found splinters of what had been priceless commission pieces, including the half-finished display cabinet for the State Museum that had been worth over $30,000. I found broken pieces of tools snapped in half by careless handling, including my grandfather's prized Japanese chisel set, valued at over $5,000. The security footage was crystal clear, showing a demolition crew arriving at 6:45 a.m., just after I'd left for the hospital. Sharon supervised the entire process, pointing out where to start, and specifically directing workers to clear everything out. When the police arrived, I showed them the footage, the certified legal notices, and the documentation of the workshop's protected status. "This isn't just vandalism," I explained. "This is a deliberate violation of County Ordinance 15.7 and destruction of protected property." The older officer shook his head as he watched the footage. "I know William Thomas's work," he said. "My wife saved for years to buy one of his jewelry boxes. The craftsmanship is incredible." His partner was carefully documenting the scene. "We'll need a full inventory of everything that was damaged or destroyed," she said, "with approximate values if possible." By the time Sharon returned with the waste management truck, the police were waiting for her. Frank had also arrived with a court reporter and a county building inspector. Sharon's smug expression vanished when she saw the official vehicles in our driveway. "What's going on here?" she demanded, clutching her clipboard like a shield. "Sharon Matthews?" the officer asked. "We're here investigating the illegal demolition of a county-protected structure and the destruction of valuable property." Sharon's face paled. "This was an approved HOA action," she stammered. "We followed all proper procedures." Frank stepped forward. "Actually, you ignored a legal cease and desist received 3 weeks ago, explicitly warning that this structure was protected under County Ordinance 15.7. He handed copies of the certified letter to the officers. "You also destroyed business property valued at over $75,000, including irreplaceable antique tools and commissioned works in progress." Sharon's composure cracked completely. "Robert approved it," she blurted. "The whole board voted. This isn't just me." But the security footage told a different story, showing Sharon alone with the demolition crew, giving specific instructions with no other board members present. I pulled out a thick folder of documentation. "This contains every permit and license dating back to 1975, I explained to the building inspector, plus the home business exemption approved by the county last month. And this." I handed him the certified mail receipt. is proof that the HOA was formally notified that any action against this structure would constitute willful property damage. The building inspector flipped through the documents, nodding slowly. "This is one of the most thoroughly documented cases I've ever seen," he remarked, looking up at Sharon. "Did you personally verify the legal status of this structure before ordering its demolition?" She shifted uncomfortably. "The architectural committee determined it was non-compliant with—" "That's not what I asked, Ms. Matthews," he interrupted. "Did you check if this structure had protected status under county ordinance?" We weren't aware of any special status," she mumbled. I pulled up the email acknowledgement from the HOA's official account, showing receipt of Frank's legal notice. "This says otherwise," I said quietly. The police officer turned to Sharon. "We'll need the contact information for the demolition company and any board members who authorize this action. We're looking at multiple potential charges here, including destruction of property, theft, and violation of county building codes." As they led Sharon away to get her statement, Frank put his hand on my shoulder. "You did everything exactly right," he said. "From the documentation to the security cameras to calling us immediately. This is as close to an open and shut case as I've ever seen." I looked at the concrete slab where the workshop had stood. "Will it matter?" I asked. "It won't bring back his tools or the pieces he was working on." "It matters," Frank assured me. "It matters legally, and it will matter to your grandfather that you fought for him, and we're not done fighting yet." The waste management truck drove away empty. The police placed evidence markers next to the piles of splintered wood and broken tools. And I sat on the front steps looking at the empty space where my grandfather's legacy had stood, knowing that Sharon had finally made the mistake we'd been waiting for. The court case Thomas v. Willowbrook Estates HOA became a landmark decision in our county. The judge not only ruled in our favor, but set a powerful precedent. Homeowners associations cannot retroactively apply restrictions to pre-existing structures or businesses. The HOA was ordered to completely reconstruct the workshop according to original specifications, using premium materials. They had to replace every destroyed tool with equivalent or superior quality. This alone cost over $92,000. My grandfather's property received a special permanent zoning variance, exempting it from all current and future HOA restrictions. Sharon and board members who approved the demolition were personally fined and removed from the HOA. New elections brought in neighbors who respected the community's diversity and history. Today, my grandfather works in his new workshop, even more beautiful than the original. The enormous windows let in perfect light, illuminating workbenches where he now trains apprentices. The walls are lined with new tools, many donated by craftsmen nationwide who heard his story. Sometimes I see Sharon driving slowly past, her face twisted with regret as she watches architecture students studying the workshop or collectors arriving to commission pieces. The brass plaque by the door has a new addition. Protected Historical Site Est, 1975, rebuilt 2023. My grandfather says wood teaches patience. Sometimes you must let plans season before they reach full potential. Our legal trap wasn't sprung in anger, but with careful preparation. Justice, like fine craftsmanship, always prevails.